Welcome everybody to this edition of Beers with Build. It's my pleasure to welcome back to the show Marvin Dyck. And Marvin, welcome back. We've got a lot to catch up on, don't we?
A little bit has happened since the last time I was on here. So yeah, well, actually, the last time we did the live event.
Yes, we did. August live event, the beer
collab
release.
Beer. Yeah, and that was a great time.
Yep. And then my first week in Nova Scotia, I heard that you had moved away from Wellington, but nobody knew where you had gone.
Just disappeared.
Yeah. So why don't you talk to us first about the APA?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, so I chose this beer because I don't know if you guys know that I love beers with hops in them, and we'll get into the Neustadt story later, but suffice it to say, there were no beers in the lineup there in the past that actually were anywhere near IPA or hoppy at all. So yeah, so I wanted to do that right away. Actually, we did release an IPA first, and this APA was actually done as part of the competition for the Ontario hop competition. So it's called the Brew On. So there's an organization called Brew Ontario, like for hops, and then it's the Hop On. So it's Hop Ontario, ON, and then it's a Brew Off. So they allow 18 different entries from around the province. And the stipulation is that you have to brew the beer using only Ontario hops. And then every year they change the style. So there's been years it's been a Belgian beer. There's been like robust porter, any style really that's hop forward. So this year was an American pale ale. So you guys, most of you are beer aficionados, so you know like an APA is very pale in color, but has a fair amount of hops. But the alcohol, there's actually a fair bit of a range, like anywhere from 4.5% to 6% is still considered APA. Personally, I like my APAs a little lower because I feel like once they get up into the 6%, you're basically an IPA at that point. And I really wanted to create something to differentiate it from the IPA. So this one is bang on 4.5%, so very much on the low side, but meant to be very crushable and have a really interesting hop bouquet with it. So I partnered with Bulldog Hops, a hop grower named Paul Vidic out of Harriston. So super close to Neustadt, only a 20-minute drive away. I'm a big fan. I mean, I love all the different Ontario hop growers. I've used Hey-Ho, Tavistock, many of the other ones, but I did feel like I wanted to use whoever was closest to me, obviously provided that the quality was there and it went in line. And as soon as I met Paul, he's a fabulous guy, and he gave me these samples, and it really kind of blew me away because he was growing varieties. Well, some of them I hadn't even heard of. So he grows 3 right now. He's fairly new, been going for 3 years now. So he's got Triumph, Comet, and Michigan Copper. And I used all 3 of those hops in this beer, with Michigan Copper being the most dominant one. So it is like for tasting notes on it, like fruit punch and like tropical things are what it has. But the Triumph hop actually has small notes of bubblegum too. So I don't know if you can detect any of that in there. And then Comet's a pretty citrusy, grapefruity kind of hop. So a lot of different things going on in this beer. But again, very finishing gravity is pretty low. This is meant to be very thirst quenching, and I really picture it as kind of like that summer beer, but also to be enjoyed by the fire, right? So yeah, anyway, so that was a little long-winded of a response, but that's the beer we're sampling right now.
It's a perfect response. It enlightens me a lot on the flavor because I was trying to identify the fruit punch.
It's different. That's what I love about it. So it's not your typical APA, and that's what I find, you know, Ontario hops can really do that, because, you know, most APAs, they're great. I love the style, but they use kind of those same different hops, the Cascade and
Yeah.
the Centennial and the Citra. And so yeah,
No, that
this is
sounds
my approach.
it sounds interesting. I'm looking forward to having a chance to get up to Neustadt to see you at the brewery and hopefully go over and visit the hop farm, because that's kind of wild that he's picked the varieties that have grown in more northern climes.
Yeah, so the Michigan Copper is came out of the breeding program. It's in a place called Zeeland outside of Holland, which is where one of my favorite breweries in the world is, New Holland. Um, but yeah, they have a whole hop breeding program. So that was the first hop that came out of it. So Michigan is doing a lot of really cool things in terms of their hop. And like you said, like I like that they're in the same climate as us and really working to push that. I mean, there's no reason that the West Coast needs to be the only place that's known for growing hops. So
Now, give us the down and dirty. What's going on?
okay, so story time. Well, you guys know my story from Wellington and how I'd been there for 18 years and really loved it. And um, yeah, it was like family there. I'd worked with a lot of the same people for many years. Brent's a terrific owner. Love what Wellington was doing, especially over the past few years with kind of the direction changing a bit and getting back into the craft more and being able to do that. But the reality, as we hired other people and had people in other roles, what fell for me was to my last title there was the VP of quality and brewing. So, I mean, that's great, but I mean, VP has certain connotations where, I'm a little more corporate in that I spend a lot more time at a desk and a lot more time dealing with people issues and long-term planning and problems. And, all of that was great. I mean, that was part of the job. And, I was fine with it and I was happy there. So I really wasn't looking for anything else. I was not actively searching for another job. I was quite content there. And then something just came along and found me. So a friend of my wife's, her neighbors were the ones that bought Newstead Springs. So Mike and Anita Weber. And so it kind of, she mentioned to them that she knew a brewmaster, which was me. And anyway, long story short, we got connected and we emailed back and forth a couple times. And then I remember we had a phone call. So I was talking to Mike because my understanding was, okay, I knew Newstead. I've known it for 15 years probably. I've been there several times. Love the spot, like love the history that was there. And the Val and Andy factor was something, but it was just, there was so much steeped in. The beers were good, so I knew all about them. I knew they were selling, but so found out this. I'm like, oh, that's really cool. Part of me was like, I wish that I could have been the one to buy it and do that, but it was that was fine. Like we were content, and so I talked to Mike and I was thinking along the lines of, at this point in my career, I can do some consulting. I can kind of help out. I know a bunch of people in the industry if they want help kind of vetting people and knowing, trying to find somebody to brew in that. So I'm like, I was all prepared for that sort of a conversation. And then he was like, well, would you consider just coming and being the brewmaster? I'm like, oh, I really hadn't thought about that. So, I said I need to think about it and talk to Heather about it. And it really wasn't, it still wasn't really, again, because I wasn't looking for it. So it took a while to sort of come over. So then I met up, we went to Borealis for a couple beers and just really hit it off. And like I felt like we really aligned on a lot of just ideology, vision, and kind of where we could take the brewery, because things that I had seen in terms of the potential, like he was talking about potential that he just saw in it as an investment and as a future livelihood for their family. And so all these things sort of kept going together. So, I approach stuff as, if the doors are closing, then whatever, it wasn't meant to be. But things just kept sort of aligning, and we kept meeting and having talks about it. And, there was an opportunity for, to have some shares in the company as well to buy in. So all these things sort of like, I could see it as a progression. And then there was the family side, because like personally, with having the children that we have in our family, we'd always wanted to have more property and that, and just in this area, we couldn't afford it. And I'd always looked that way because things being a little bit more inexpensive, I thought, okay, here's a chance we could, potentially do that as well for the family. This could be a large thing. And like, so that was probably the second piece to it. And then the third was really with where Wellington was at. I was so confident that I could walk away from that and they would be completely fine. So I basically worked myself to be fairly redundant and very confident with the team there. Again, if this had happened 2 or 3 years ago, I could never have done it. I mean, Wellington was close to my heart. I put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into that place to get it to where it was. But I was very confident with the team that was in place, and I thought, you know what, I can walk away from this. And I was pretty confident we could do it very amicably, and like we would be in a good place. So yeah, I sat down with Brent, had that conversation. He was really sad, and tried to keep me there to stay. I said, no, like this is something I feel like is meant to be. And so that happened in September when I actually officially moved over full time. So that's the shorter version. So
the down and dirty part. Okay.
That's right. Yeah.
Serendipity, fate, luck, chance, magic, eh?
Yeah.
Everything just kind of all fit together at the same time.
And a little bit of faith in there,
Yep, a little bit of faith. Well, I have to say this, Marvin. We have a number of excellent brewmasters at other microbreweries who trained under you. Lager Dave comes to mind, but there's 2 or 3 other people who are out there right now who got their starts at Wellington Brewery and moved on. So
yeah, and I really am proud of that. And those guys, like, it's interesting, you grow as a person, right? So the first one to do it was actually Brian Mahar, who started Block 3. And I remember being super annoyed at him. I'm like, how could you leave me? Like, I trained you, and like you're a great brewer now, and like you're just gonna leave. And then I think Kevin was the next one, because he left for Forefathers at first before he ended up at Block 3. And again, I was a little bit, and then I started to like mature a little as a human being and started to realize that actually it's more of a compliment than anything, that these guys are confident enough to go out on their own after having the experience at Wellington and lead their own breweries, right? So Dave as well, Mike Brooks, and even Matt Manugian too at Furnace Room. So there's been quite a few that are, and they're great people. Like, I have relationship with them all now. I don't think they hate me anymore, and no, it's all good.
Oh yeah, well, you know what, there's always a love-hate relationship with your boss.
When you're working together, absolutely. Yeah.
But I know from my conversations with Kevin and Dave that they all speak very highly of you.
So thank you.
What's the second beer we're going to go to?
Well, we're going to go to a blast from the past and do the 10W30.
Okay.
So this is kind of a cool opportunity to talk about just the rebrand and stuff as well. So I'm not sure if everyone's had a chance yet, but like that was part of doing it. I got a whole new appreciation for the other parts of a brewery. I mean, being with Wellington and back in the day when it was a lot smaller, I was aware of all the different things that happened, but now we're talking like a pretty small team here. We've got Mike and Nita and their kids, myself and Vicky, and that's basically it. And so all of these processes, they take a ton of time and like back and forth, and just coming up with this logo. I mean, that whole process, like, I don't know what I thought, how it happened in my head. It just, just happened. But it's and then there's issues that go along with that in terms of, printing things and getting the colors right, and like, yeah. So it's a lot of decisions have to be made, and like there's always going to be missteps along the way, but you try to learn from them and get better for the next time. So, and even keeping, like, it's different starting a brewery versus taking over something like this, right? This is a 20-year-old. I'm sorry, they released 10W30 in, it's not quite 20 years, in 2005. So does anyone, I talked to Vicky about this the other day. I remember when it first came out. So it came out in bottles, and they had a little tag with an elastic, and there was no label on it, but that was the 10W30. I don't know if anyone else remembers those days.
Remember that, because that was how it was introduced to Troy at the bar.
Oh, right.
We were one of the first ones to actually get it on tap. I'm sure that we were within like the first 3 months of them releasing it, because I walk in and I'm like, what's that? And then I read the label. I'm like, that is so cool. Yes.
Well, and did you have the oil can tap handle?
No, we never got a tap handle from them, which is unfortunate, because that was a fantastic tap handle.
Yeah, the story, but they dumped the oil out. They bought oil and then poured it out into other containers, and then filled it with spray foam, I think, and turned it into a tap handle.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I don't know. It's a bit of an odd way to do it, but so yeah, this beer, I'm sure most people have had it, but it's a classic English brown ale. Yeah, I love it. Like, I've always liked this beer. I find it, I like where the alcohol's at, like 5.5%. So it just gives you a bit more of the balance to the notes in it. And yeah, very smooth. It's excellent on cask too, if you've ever had the chance to try it on cask. And yeah, just very smooth. So it's a good, it's one of those darker beers that's actually, can be enjoyed year round. Like, it's not too heavy. And yeah, so I'm seeing a comment about tweaking the recipe. So this is a really interesting conversation, because I know what's going to come up. People ask this all the time, right? When a brewmaster takes over for somebody else, it's like, well, are you going to change the recipes and all that? And like, the answer is no. Like, I keep the recipes, but that being said, like doesn't mean some things don't get changed. And part of that is because the raw ingredients themselves change. So the malt is never, I mean, we're not like the big guys where we can demand that our malt is in a certain spec. It does change from time to time. So my extract will not always be the same. So when I run off from the mash to the kettle, I'm going to check what my gravity is. I'm going to look at the color. I'm going to look at all these things. And I sometimes have to make adjustments there. So that's kind of the nature of craft brewing, especially when you don't have automation. So I'm doing all of this by hand, which is something I love. Like, again, I should have mentioned this before, but part of another factor in, the move to Neustadt was to get back to doing the things that I love to do, which is brewing beer, being hands-on, being able to fix stuff, and just being intimately involved in everything. And so brewing is, I left Wellington where we had an automated system, and went back to opening and closing the valves and kind of like tapping it a little bit to get it just right, and all these other kind of hand things where it really is a mixture of art and science as you try to get the beer. But again, like, trying to get that consistency is where the tweaks come in. So I don't want to speak, I want to be cautious that I'm not too negative about because people have different ways of doing stuff. But what I was, when I took over from the previous people, I wasn't given a lot of like concrete things. For instance, like nothing was calibrated. So it was like kind of bring it to here and then take it to here. And I'm like, I can't work in that environment. So, calibrated things properly. And then, I document stuff so that I know, okay, so this batch turned out this way. So now the next one, maybe I want to just, tweak this a little bit because I know it'll be a little bit better. Like everything that's done is to make it more to what like the brand is intended to be. So everything is meant to bring it to be more consistent and better, right? I'm always trying to, like, I'm never content with it being like, oh, that's it, I'm never going to change anything, and just because I know I've done that in the past. And if you're not constantly like trying to improve on things, all of a sudden you'll wake up one day and you won't realize where you are because things have not gone the way they were supposed to. So always take readings, always take measurements, and yeah, even the water can change too, right? We're on spring water, so depending on the runoff for the year, I mean, the water table is so high right now. If anyone needs water, we have lots of water. So the spring produces like 30,000 liters a day, and I think it's producing more than that right now. And yeah, so lots of good water.
You would have to watch the impact of that across the year because it would change. You're right, depending not just how much rainfall, but where it's actually pulling from the groundwater.
Exactly.
So that's a good discussion about the art and the science of brewing beer, because there's a whole group of measurements, and then there's that art. Derek says, oh, so there's no magic button to push like he did at Wellington when we brewed.
Well, we did brew on the pilot system there, which is less automated than the big system, but yeah.
He got to push the button. That's all it mattered.
Yeah.
So we've touched on what my first question, I have to admit this, the first question that I wrote down was, how did you know it was time? But we've kind of touched on that.
Yeah.
How'd you feel when you walked in the brewery the first time?
I felt incredibly excited. So how can I say this without sounding creepy? I like to smell places when I go there first. So walking into a place, you take a breath, and it's like what comes in. It's like encountering beer. I smell it before I drink it, right? So walking into a place and like walking into the brewery there, like just the smell, like the history, like the wood, and the char from 1869 when the place burnt down and then was rebuilt, and just like the other smells of a brewery that are just there, like the malt, and then just knowing that like this was a place where I could have that creative control, where I could be the brewmaster. I would be responsible, yes, but also there's an excitement in that. So yeah, it was like the 25-year-old Marvin again. I felt younger. I really did. So very excited.
That's fantastic. And there's something about that building when you walk in the first time, that history that's there.
Yeah.
Now, it's been a brewery since, my mind is clicking here on this, 1950, 18 something.
59. You were going to say it.
Yeah, 1859.
Yeah, that's right.
So
Yeah, and it's interesting because again, like we could go on just stories about that. So actually, the building that's there now was not the brewery. Like the brewery was behind it. It was part of it. It was, but there was a whole other section that went behind it, and then right down, and the little stream that's back there was actually a pond. They had it fully dammed off, and it was the mill pond. So they would cut trees, and there was a sawmill there. I mean, it was a very self-sufficient sort of entity. Like breweries really were, that's what a lot of people don't realize. Like they were much more than they are today. Like back then, the sawmill was there. They had an ice house where they would cut the blocks from the pond, and for the winter, and then for the summer they could keep things cold. Like all this had, there was the hotel in the front part, the stable on the other end. So the stable is what caught fire and burnt down then. So there was a fire. Well, I'm guessing they rebuilt it in '69, so it would have been around then. So the place burnt down, and then the it's all fieldstone now. So what they did is they put a call out to the farmers and offered to trade them beer for fieldstone so that they could rebuild it rapidly and make it resistant to fire the next time. So that's why all that building now is actually the fieldstone. So it wasn't originally like that, but they learned from their mistake.
Yes, and the farmers
Because
were
brewery
lined up
fires
for
were quite
miles.
common. Yeah.
Yeah. Where are you going, honey? I've got a load of stone. I'm going to Neustadt. Oh, I can just imagine that. Oh, wow. That's a very unique piece of history there, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Everything that's gone on, how are you staying grounded?
Yeah, I think, I mean, like we've talked about in the past, like I've always tried to keep that position of hope and being grounded in my faith and other people, and just still surrounding yourself with people and having conversations, and really trying to just stay away from the divisiveness, and that's really seems to be so prevalent right now, because I feel like the hope is getting stronger, right? I mean, at this point, we're 2 years into the pandemic. We've seen some highs and lows, but a lot of more positives, and I don't know, I choose to feel that way, like we are moving into something that again, we don't know the future, but we never really did during this. So yeah, just staying grounded by focusing on work that does help a lot, like just being able to take this new venture, and I mean, like we could go a lot deeper psychologically and wonder if that played into it, because like COVID played into like the career change as well. But I don't know. It's too hard to answer that question because you'd have to separate all the other variables. But it definitely led to a restlessness amongst people, and I mean they've tracked this data. Like a lot of people have changed careers. They have done like these bigger moves, and they have done these sort of things. So was that a sorry, now I'm waxing philosophical here. Was that a factor for me? I don't know. I think I think the other things were stronger, and I don't think that really impacted it for me, but it did give something nice to focus on that wasn't related to that. Here's a challenge. Here's a new venture that I can put my focus on and kind of throw myself into, and then again, having family. We just welcomed our 8th child into the world, so that also helps too. So
Well, congratulations.
thank you.
So the question would be, are you happy?
Yes, I
And
am.
that's really all that matters. You look so much more relaxed and content right now. And that's all I'm going to say. Texas tea, honey stout.
Yeah. So the other thing, I picked two beers that were part of the prior lineup, but I did brew both of these, and then two of them were my creation. So I thought that was a kind of fair sort of representation. So sorry, I poured too much of the 10W here, obviously, so I'm still working on that.
No problem, Marvin.
I should have got another glass, actually. That would have been smarter, but okay, so this one, this is an interesting beer. Like, it's been around for a while, and I know Andy put it through many different iterations. So I believe it used to have an alcohol like more around 6, and then he kept dropping it. And so I actually like it where it is now. So 4.6%. So it does kind of get into that nice, like, lower alcohol stout range where you don't have quite like that sweetness of the alcohol, but then you need more hops and bitterness. I mean, those beers have a place, but I love to be able to enjoy a lower alcohol stout. And it does have honey in it. So again, like, I'm not putting the honey in post fermentation, so it does get fermented. Again, that's a safer way to do it. So the honey taste is pretty subtle there, but it does give a little something to balance out the roastiness. But yeah, I'm quite fond of this beer as just as a nice approachable stout, because again, sometimes stouts can be so big that people are scared off by them. And Texas tea, so I was going to talk about that. So this was one of those ones, because again, talking back about that process of rebranding, trying to come up with new labels and names and stuff, and do you change the name, do you not? Like, these are all discussions we had to have. I mean, first and foremost, do you change the name of the brewery, right? Do you say, oh, this is a whole new start and we're gonna change that? But obviously we wanted to keep it the same. Again, there's so much tie-in with the history there. But so some of the beers, like, we have just changed the name, but are keeping the recipes the same beer. This one, though, it was troublesome, because we're like, Texas tea. So obviously Andy picked the name because of the Beverly Hillbillies. So it's like the black gold sort of thing. So we were kind of humming and hawing, but it's like, I mean, it does kind of have that reference to tie into 10W30. So I think we're gonna keep the name Texas tea, honey stout, and yeah, it's I don't know, pretty approachable kind of stout.
As it is. Are you using a local honey supplier?
So for this batch, I didn't, because I didn't have anyone, but I did. I ran into a guy that really fascinating, had been looking at research with bees. So he has honey. So now I have a contact. I just didn't when I made this. I made this beer last year, so it's actually a few months old, but still tasting really good. But this guy had done some research and read some other research where bees are really like So it's the last runnings of your wort. So normally, like when you brew, you have your first, your middle, and your last running. So that's the wort that's running off. And then you get to a point where you have to cut it off. So you start off with a really high concentration of sugar in your wort, and then as it goes, there's more water that's your sparge that's flushing it through, and then at some point you have to cut that off, and then you end up draining the rest out. There's really nothing else you can do with it. Well, there have been studies where they've collected this and actually used it to feed honeybees, and they've produced like better and more extensive honey. So he was doing this kind of cool research. So we were talking about that and like him getting some and doing some experiments. So yeah, I haven't progressed with that at all, but I think it's kind of a cool thing. Like we're always looking for ways to use like the things that are waste, right? Like that's spent grains is the big one where it goes to local farms, but there's other aspects of in breweries where it'd be kind of neat if you could do that. There's some yeast that you end up with extra of that, and I think there's a lot to be explored there in terms of agriculture and different things. So, but that was a new one. In all of my 18 years, I'd never heard anyone talking about that before. So I have this guy's contact, and I hope to. I mean, this is not the season to do it, but hopefully we can in the spring or summer we can do some experiments with this.
I got firsthand knowledge of that. So my property in the East Coast, the guy keeps bees on the cleared piece just above me.
Okay.
And they put spent, like the bottom of the wort tank that they drain out, they put that in drums, and the bees just love it when you get towards the end of the season. But wow, does it ever smell pretty raunchy once in a while. May have lost Marvin. Oh, you're back.
Yeah, sorry, my internet seems to be acting up.
Yeah, it says your
back?
bandwidth is low.
Hold on, I might let me try something, but I might disappear for a second. You might have to let me back in. Is that better?
You're not frozen anymore. That's the best part. Okay.
Well, the worst part is I missed the ending of that the bee story.
So they just did that. I'm always down there, the end of August, first part of September, and that's sort of he put the bee colony there because of all the wildflowers that grow on the property that I own.
Yeah.
But they put the spent sugar water, and does it ever get horrid smelling? That's all I'm gonna say. I actually had to ask him, can you please move the can another 20, 30 feet further away from my property so I can enjoy the space? They were good about it. I couldn't move it because it was too close to the colony. As soon as you went near it, you would be swarmed. So
right.
And
oh man.
But that was interesting that they were doing that. So I had a long conversation with him, and he told me this makes the best honey going because they've got this constant supply of sugar for them.
Yep.
Which is nectar to them.
Yeah, that's what this guy was telling me too. So I found it fascinating to think that you could use the wort as long as it had a certain amount of sugar, but you can even mix even if it doesn't have the right amount, you
Just
take,
mix
it's a
sugar in it.
better starting point. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's
So-
what he did. He there's a whole science to how much sugar level you have to have in the liquid, and that's
Yep.
what he did. He mixed sugar into it and got it to what he needed it to be.
Cool.
Yeah, so it's an interesting thing that people have figured out how to do. So
I hadn't thought about the smell though. That is a very good point.
it is what it is. Okay.
Yeah.
So change is always a difficult thing to do when you buy a business, especially when you're in a smaller community. So I'm curious, what's sort of the next things that are going to happen at Neustadt?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So, and from talking to some people about the previous owners, I feel like they didn't engage like well enough with the community that was there. So I know for Mike and Anita, what I respect a lot about what they've done right away is to use like people in the community to do things for the brewery to make it better. So for instance, the patio that was in the front in the previous years, like right on the highway with the trucks going by, you cannot have a conversation with anyone. They got a local guy that does a fabulous flagstone work. Like he went to the quarry and picked out all this flagstone. So he laid the patio that now goes on the side and around the back. So unfortunately, it got finished too late in the season for us to use it. But we're really looking forward to getting that open as soon as it's kind of patio season. And there's just a perfect example. This guy Neil, incredible workmanship. Like he spent just watching him out there cutting the flagstone and laying all the pieces. Like it's a work of art, really. Like you can, and it lasts for a super long time. So making that investment in the local companies, like we've got a sign shop right across the road, and so we're getting a brand new sign like for the brewery, and got that guy to do it. Like got local people to do the t-shirts and support the local restaurant and the general store. Like Neustadt is not a very big place, right? I think the population is 500, but there are businesses there. So like making the upgrades in collaboration with these other people, I think is the big I just think it's super smart. And I love that they Mike and Mia had that vision going in as well. And then in terms of like inside, like we're working away slowly at kind of doing some of those renos. So like today they were just working on the kitchen because we want to have some food available. Nothing like full scale kitchen with a deep fryer and all that. Just having some light fare so that people, when they're having some samples, they can order some food to go with it when people are stopping by. So that's going to be a key thing for the future, and also getting the caverns back so we can run tours again. So again, tying back to the history, like people want to see this building. This building is incredible and it's got stories, and we can't wait to bring people through. But everyone wants to see the caverns. Like, let's be honest, right? Like there's only Formosa and Neustadt that have caverns. Formosa, I don't know, that place is going to get demolished one of these days. So then we'll be like the only ones in Ontario. And yeah, like it's beautiful down there. There's a little bit of work to do there though. So just, get some proper lighting so we can take people down there safely. But yeah, like that's kind of the few things that we have on the horizon, and we're just really looking forward to that. So I'm trying to keep an eye on these. I'm so bad at keeping an eye
Don't
on
even
the
worry
chats,
about that.
but
If there's something
okay,
important, I'll get back to you about it. Okay.
perfect.
Okay. Katie's lived her family. She grew up near there, and her
Sweet.
mother still lives north of there. So she was
Nice.
curious if it was messy down in the caverns, and the answer would be yes. Of course, it's still messy.
Yeah, but it's not super bad. Like really, all that's down there is there's some old barrels that some of them have fallen apart, so we need to clear those up. The electrical wasn't really done properly with proper conduit and that. So again, we've had the electrician there, so we need to get that done. And then the other issue is just again, there's so much water everywhere and snow and that. So like the melting and the runoff on that, it's wet. So but there's a few things I know we're looking at, like eaves troughs, the roof, part of it was done, but the other part got finished in the fall. And so all these things are, again, there's a ton of things with an old building that are constantly needing maintenance. So but yeah, like the caverns are not really that bad. Like if I've taken people down on private tours, and it's good. Where the spring comes in, again, there's so much water that the one end is underwater. So we have to look at actually rerouting the water a little bit so it goes into the creek. But yeah.
So Terry and Emma were curious: is Neustadt on tap anywhere in the region right now?
I just dropped kegs off at 13 Food and Beverage in Cambridge here. And then Harold does take it from time to time. I need to check in with him again with things being shut down there for a bit. Like we weren't anywhere, so I'll check back in with him. Paul at the Woolly has taken it a bit from time to time. And is Cam still on there? Cam is taking, I'm delivering a keg to Cam tomorrow, so that's exciting. We will be on at the Waterloo Grad House. And trying to think if that's it in this area. If you go farther afield, we've got a few other spots. Again, we don't want to get crazy with that, and really just be on in kind of the key, like locally, we'll hit as many people in our area as possible, but then farther afield, it's like the craft beer bars, right? That's where we want to be, get our name out there. And then we're also getting our online store up and running too, so then we can start shipping, and we'll be shipping across Ontario. So that's another way for us to get the beer there. But again, bread and butter, what we really want is the people traveling by the brewery, come to the brewery, come see the history, hear our story, buy beer there, go up, visit the brews. Again, promote like tourism in Grey County. Like there's a lot going on, and I think a lot up and coming too. Like it's just a great area to visit and vacation and that. So we should probably, shall we get to the last beer?
Yes, that's what I was just going to say. Let's try
I'm
the winter
excited.
ale now.
This is the whole reason I got the fireplace going. So this was a fun beer to create. So we had some discussions, like Mike and Anita and the kids and the team. We wanted to create this. So I got some of the Granville Island winter ale, and so we tasted that, and we all kind of liked like that, but we wanted to change it a little bit, and the color, and I patterned this after like a red ale, and then just really went to town with the spices on it. So
Yes.
but I love giving this to somebody, and they invariably say, "Oh, I taste apple." And there's no apple in this beer or the off flavor that could go with that. It's the cinnamon, because we associate cinnamon and apple so much together.
Yeah.
And there is orange peel, so there is that that note there too. But
Backhand hint of citrus.
yeah,
You've got a great job of balancing this.
thank you. That is the toughest part about spiced beers.
Yep. Yeah. They're just, see, I got the cinnamon right away. And when you said apple, now it's associated in my head with apple. But I was like the cinnamon, and then I'm like, the orange is so subtle at the back of it. It's done. And I can appreciate that, because that is so hard to get that match.
Yeah, and there's a hint of vanilla in there too.
Yeah.
Again, it's subtle, like on purpose, because vanilla again can take over something, but I really wanted that. I don't know, I just find cinnamon like is warming itself as a spice, and then like at 6%, but again, very, very dry, like there's no back end sweetness to this. All meant to give that kind of warming sensation and just comforting, right? Like where you can sit next to the fire, you can sip away at this and enjoy a good book or good conversation with people.
So did you use vanilla bean or vanilla extract?
So I used real vanilla extract. So
Okay.
yeah.
So vanilla bean, but as an extract.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I feel you can tell when you use the extract versus like the artificial, sorry, versus the natural.
Oh, absolutely. I get it, because I make vanilla ice cream for Jackie because it's her favorite, and real vanilla bean versus the artificial extract is like night and day difference. Yeah. You can't miss it. So Cam's curious, and he's making a comment that the danger thing is like using excess cloves. So did you use cloves?
There's no clove in this.
I didn't think so, because cloves usually, even just a hint of them, have a very distinctive final flavor. And then, Jen did no nutmeg either.
No, it literally is just cinnamon, orange peel, and vanilla. So again, spices terrify me, because it's like I know what it's like when they go wrong, and this was a very nerve-wracking beer to make. And it seems like it's so simple, right? But it's like it is not. So I do it in stages, because I find that's the easiest way. So like I put in probably about half of it into the whirlpool, and then let it ferment and taste it, and then I'll make another tincture of it where I just boil the same ingredients together again with how much I think I need to bump it up, because you can't take them out after you got them in there. So but you can always bump it up. And so we went through that process again. I love to get other people to taste it, and we can discuss it. And I mean, I love that aspect of brewing, like the collaborative nature, because I mean, I have blind spots in my tasting, right? Like I don't get it right all the time. So it's good to have other people's feedback and then just talk about it, right? But the brewery definitely smelled absolutely incredible that day when I did the extra spice. That was a special day.
That would definitely be invoking memories of Christmas at that moment, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Well,
Oh,
we did it. I'm hoping to bring this beer back next year, because we got, again, with all the changes, we got it out a little bit late. So I think we released it the week before Christmas. I would like to get it out like a few weeks before Christmas. So we still have a bunch of it. But it's still winter, so keep drinking it. And but it's been going over really well. Like, once people are, again, it's kind of a novel style, and not everybody knows what to expect, but generally once they try it, they like it. And I mean, again, it's not for everyone if you don't like those flavors, but yeah.
I've been looking at the chat line. You've been getting all kinds of accolades for hitting it bang on. So,
Oh,
and
thank
then
you.
Katie, who has taken up home brewing in the past year, and bless her, she is very experimental. Tried to do a Christmas porter. Unfortunately,
Yeah.
the spices were lost somewhere, and she made a great porter, but just didn't get the spices, which is a
Yeah,
lot better than going, I made a porter and it tasted way too much like this.
I was just gonna say that. Like, that's, if you're gonna err one way, then that's the best way. A good porter can be drank, but if you overspice it, like, you can't even drink it. Like,
No, you can't. And there's nothing you can do to age it to make it better.
no, keep blending, keep blending.
So your routine has changed a lot because you're still commuting Cambridge to Neustadt. How's that affecting you?
Yeah, and that's definitely been a pretty big struggle, because it's hard to develop a routine. So I mean, part of that is because life at home here is changing, but I'm trying to get on more of a schedule, where I get up, do a workout in the morning, get on the road. But I'm finding I don't have enough time to do everything. And so yeah, it's a struggle. And I like to start my mornings early, but when you're driving an hour and a half, then I'm starting more a little later, and then I end up staying a little later. And but again, I know all these things are temporary, so that definitely helps. But yeah, routine is a hard thing right now. So, but we'll get there.
I can well imagine. So Mike has a sort of a home brewer question. Do you dry hop the spices, or in sort of like dry style, or do you get it all done before fermentation?
Oh, and that's a great question. So that's what I was alluding to. I wasn't super clear on that, though. I do both. So I'll put in an amount in, again, I'm a fairly safe brewer, so I don't tend to take a lot of chances microbially. So like, the whole issue with dry hopping is you're adding something into a beer, and if there's anything, I know spices should be fairly antimicrobial, but I still feel safer like boiling stuff. Plus, you get a better extract of the flavors. So what I do is I'll put some into the whirlpool. Again, I'll be fairly conservative on that amount, knowing that I'll probably need to add more later. But that later stage, then I literally just put a pot on a burner. And then, so I did this for this beer. I added the cinnamon and orange peel and boiled that just in water. And because that'll get rid of the oxygen. Because again, when you're doing it post fermentation, you have to be a little bit worried about oxygen pickup. But as long as you boil it well, you're going to extract the flavors that you want. And it's going to be safe. That's the other big thing, because there won't be anything growing on it, no microbial issues. And then you can actually do mock-ups then too. That's what I love to do. Just get a cheap pipette, like or something you can measure with. So I'll do my boil, then I'll grab a sample from the tank because it's done fermenting now, and then I'll just do ratios. I'll start and be like, all right, what happens if I add this full amount of the pot? That's usually where I start. I'm like, I'm going to add all of this. So then I add it in to my sample and be like, that's good or that's too much, and then I'll maybe dial it back. Maybe I only add half of it, or maybe I need more, right? But you can do all of that experimentation at that point. And yeah, that way you can really dial in the amount of spices that you use. So that's just my approach to it. But yeah.
Okay, so then my question goes, are you using ground cinnamon or cinnamon stick, like the actual bark?
I use the bark.
Yeah. Okay.
I
Because
like,
you get a lot better extract out of the bark.
yeah,
So,
yeah. It hurts. I had to, well, it was the sticks, but then I broke them apart because I wanted to get that extra surface
yeah.
area, right? So after breaking apart, there's a fair bit of cinnamon in there. So my thumbs were starting to feel, and I like to actually just chew on the bark. Like it's a great little breath freshener. So
Marvin, it has been so great to catch up with you. Thank you for joining me tonight on Beers with
thanks,
Bill.
Bill.
And
Likewise.
for those of you who haven't emailed me, next week, the collab release with Counterpoint at Counterpoint Live, you do need to book your spot ahead of time. So if you do, email me, let me know.
Thanks, Bill.